Joey, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Joey Flores. I'm a founder of Inversion Art. I've been in the tech entrepreneurship space for 24 years, have been at a number of successful startups, including founded my own company back in 2010, which we got into Y Combinator with. But I'm also a painter and an artist, a multidisciplinary artist. So, very much have a love for the arts, but come from a tech startup background.
Jonathan, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jonathan Neal. I am the co-founder of Inversion Art. Prior to partnering with Joey on this venture, I was the director of the Center for Business and Management of the Arts at Claremont Graduate University. And prior to that, the founding director of Sotheby's Institute of Art in Los Angeles. I've served on the mastheads of a number of art world magazines and journals, including Art Review magazine and the Brooklyn Rail. I've worked at the Drawing Center and the Brooklyn Museum. I've taught at Columbia University and the New School and other institutions. And I have a PhD in modern art history from Columbia University as well.
So you're telling me that you guys have no credibility in the space, basically.
Right.
Yeah, depends on who you ask.
What was your inspiration for founding Inversion Art?
Yeah, I mean, you know, uh, we like to think that at least a big part of the vision for inversion art is to be the Y Combinator of the art world. That might not mean everything to everybody, but who don't know what Y Combinator is. But Y Combinator is a very special funding program for entrepreneurs that's based in Silicon Valley. I was very fortunate to be chosen along with my other business partners for our company to go through that program in 2011, and frankly, it changed our lives. Not only helped us accomplish things with our company that we never would have been able to without the program, but it continues to be an amazing network of other like-minded entrepreneurs that we can tap for various opportunities. So in 2020, the idea for a YC for artists was sort of floated to me, and it just sounded like an amazing thing to do. I thought, if we could build an organization that did for artists what Y Combinator does for entrepreneurs, it would certainly be one of the most profound things anybody could do for the art world. Like that just sounded like something worth dedicating, my time and attention and a whole lot of energy and heartache to. So, embarked on that mission, and we hope to change the way that artists are funded and supported, with, a combination of both access to financing, but also access to services and things that they need in order to advance their careers in a more scalable way that gives them more control over their own destiny.
And I'll add that when Joey and I were put in touch by a mutual colleague, I was running graduate programs for basically business-minded people who are interested in going into the art and cultural sector. We had a focus on entrepreneurship. I had listened to probably 200 to 250 pitches for various different types of art and cultural businesses from my students, many of which were very good, some of which have come to fruition. But it takes that many to know when you hear something that really has the legs and the structure to be transformative. So once Joey came to me with the idea that he had been working on for some time, it seemed like a very, very viable new player to introduce into the art and cultural sector, as I understood it at the time. And for me personally, had been involved in graduate programs for more than a decade that were training new generations of artists and arts managers. And the education system, as much as I'm a big devotee of it and very much a product of it, seems to have some challenges. And inversion art was an opportunity to see something that could create an alternative for both practicing artists and others to gain a foothold in the art world, get the support that they needed, and to launch their careers or accelerate their careers in a way that MFA programs and arts programs have been promising, but I'd say over the last 15, 20 years have had a harder time delivering on.
Now, you started to talk a little bit about this, Joey, but what types of benefits does inversion art bring to up and coming artists, whether they're early stage, mid career, et cetera? Basically, can you go a little bit deeper on the benefits that you guys offer?
I think like what I found when I started researching the market is just that, first off, there are a lot of programs out there that are like focused on artists that are just trying to get their foot in the art market. I think that in fact, there's quite a lot more programs for like very emerging artists and people who are struggling to get sales. And a lot of the art tech platforms help you with trying to sell and monetize your work. But there's actually like a huge drop off in the number of services that are focused on artists that are actually doing pretty well. I think, once you achieve a certain amount of success in the art market, what happens is more and more of your time is taken away from the act of creating art and is starting to be dedicated towards things like, reviewing contracts and doing your accounting and getting your taxes filed and things like that. And so the more successful you are, the more of this additional work comes with that success. And at some point, artists they kind of stall out. They have a very hard time bridging the gap between being a solo practitioner who's making art and starting to make their way, and all of a sudden they're getting success, but they are having a very hard time managing all of the things that come with that success from an administration and logistics standpoint. So as I was doing my research, my number one goal was to create a program like Y Combinator where we would invest in artists with a very equitable investment model, which turned out to mostly just be like buying their work. It turns out that the best way to kind of get in early in terms of like, backing an artist is to buy their work before it becomes incredibly valuable. And so, we looked at the model for investing in artists is really to buy their work. But what we found was that they had a lot of challenges from a logistical administrative standpoint that, it would not be wise to invest in them if you were going to then let them be hamstrung by the day-to-day. So, we added on to our vision sort of this big studio management division that would manage artists' studio affairs. And in order to do that, we need to be working with artists that are at a certain level. So for us, we're working with artists who are earning, $70,000 and above. That's kind of the point at which their like day-to-day operations become quite burdensome. And it also just from an economic standpoint is the point at which it starts to make sense for us because we work on a purely revenue sharing basis. So for our artists, we provide, we have two kind of divisions. We have the studio management division where we like to say we take care of anything that we can do from behind a screen. So it's your tax filing, it's your accounting, it's your legal services, but it's also communications with museums and institutions, logistics, getting your inventory into an inventory management system, responding to inbound sales requests and things like that. So we're really just, we have studio managers that work within the company that have been trained to manage, quite a number of complex issues for the artists. So we're basically handling all of their day-to-day affairs, and that's the studio management side. And then on the investing side, it's a different animal. We invest in artists in groups. Just twice a year, we bring in 15 artists. We invest in them by buying some of their work and putting it in our collection. We put them through a 3-month career development program where we're working with them on defining their goals, what's important to them, what do they want to see happen over the next 3 to 5 years. We pick artists for that program who are incredibly, incredibly ambitious and already have a very clear vision of where they want to go with their practice. And, we pick artists we believe we can help with that. So we help them think about who are the next level players that they want to be working with for that next phase of their career. Who's the next gallerist they maybe need to work with? How do they take their career to the next level? We come up with a strategy plan with them for that. And then at the end of the program, we bring together curators, collectors, and galleries for an exhibition where the artists get to sort of present their vision for the future of their practice. And our goal is to really help them secure relationships with people that are kind of at, the next level that they need to be working at for those goals to take effect. So, on the one hand, we're just doing, very simple day-to-day logistics and administrative handling. And on the investing side, we're really taking a really strong active role in the career of the artists and helping them achieve things that they would not be able to do on their own. And then we, enjoy the journey with them by owning some of their art and hoping that as their careers take off, so does the value of our asset class.
Jonathan, do you have anything to say in addition to what Joey said, or do you guys have anything further to say about the due diligence process?
Sure. Yeah, I can elaborate on that. As Joey said, the artists that we work with demonstrate a significant amount of ambition. They've already have gained traction within the marketplace, regardless of which marketplace that might be. It might be the sort of standard art gallery, museum, art fair nexus. It might be NFTs. It might be, something in the kind of commercial art field as well. there has to be something about the artist that we believe in and can see that they really have a goal in mind for their practice, but they've already achieved a certain sort of benchmark of revenue to the studio that means that they're running up against these limitations that Joey explained. I should say we also, for the investment program, have spent a lot of time looking at the various different signals that, though they don't guarantee, at least are kind of lead indicators of artists who go on to have a significant amount of success. So that might be everything from certain types of exhibitions that they've been included in, from the Whitney Biennial to the Made in LA Biennial in Los Angeles, to Greater New York at PS1 in New York City, to certain MFA programs these days. Certainly a Yale MFA signals quite a lot for artists going forward in the marketplace, although definitely not a guarantor of commercial success. There are other signals that we've developed, certain kind of grants, certain kinds of awards that we take note of and pursue artists and have relationships with artists, build relationships with artists who exhibit those signals. And that's a way for us, in some sense, of de-risking the success that we believe the artists are going to have going forward when we decide to invest in them for the accelerator program.
Just to add to that, I think, first off, Jonathan's been working in this market for a very long time. Not only has the background of, a deep understanding of art history, but, having worked for Art Review and the Brooklyn Rail, is very much has his finger on the pulse of what's been going on in the art world for, not only from the historical perspective, but certainly the ultra contemporary perspective. And, when you look at artists who are achieving very, very high art values these days, and then you go back and look at the kinds of things that they were accomplishing earlier in their careers, there's some trends there in terms of the kinds of things that they were all participating in and the kind of achievements that they were getting, the kinds of galleries they were working with. And so there tends to be, there can be a lot of routes to success. There's no one route. And, certainly what we try to do is, nurture the route that the artist wants to take. Or at least advise them that if they have particular goals that they need to go down a certain route. But once we did an analysis of 1,000 artists who were kind of achieving some of the things that we thought would correlate to high long-term art values, and certainly found that certain types of signals did correlate with high long-term art values. So as Jonathan said, graduating from certain degree programs, it's not a shoe in that you're going to be, commercially successful, but there is a higher correlation that people who graduated from Yale, for example, tend to have higher art values later in their career. People who are in the Whitney Biennial tend to have higher art values later in their career. And there's a bunch of signals like that we were able to identify. So, and sometimes those signals, by the time those signals have happened, it's a little late in the artist's career for you to kind of jump on and be that early stage investor. They're already achieving a success that means that they may not need a program like ours. But we also know, like, what are the signals just before those signals? Like, before you get into the Whitney Biennial, what are the kinds of shows that you're in? What are the kinds of galleries you're working with and things like that? What are the kind of recognition that you're getting? So, we've done a lot of analysis around that, and we tend to sort of look for artists that are achieving things that we know means that they are on the path to hitting these signals, if not achieving the signals directly.
Yeah. And I'll add to that again, too, that it's kind of funny. It's not just signals intelligence, it's a lot of human intelligence too. We spent a lot of time building a board of advisors of other artists and other senior professionals and seasoned professionals in the art world that provide recommendations that we bounce ideas off of. So by no means just us, running a spreadsheet of a bunch of different markers that then come up with some formula that we can follow. There's as much art as there is science to it. And so because of that, the best way of moving forward for us was to make sure that we had a lot of other intelligent, smart people that we could put artists in front of and help us think through who would be the best people to bring into the program and the best people to support, who are people that maybe need a couple more years before a program like ours is really going to be helpful, who are people that may be beyond the scope of who we can help. But it's great to have the board of advisors that we do, who come from sort of all areas and all ages of the art world, to be able to bounce those ideas off of.
Now, with how many artists have you worked since formation of Inversion Art?
So I would say, we've done a project or two with artists that, we just saw an opportunity to work with them on a particular thing. But right now we have contracts with 8 artists whose studios we completely manage. Well, no, let me rephrase that. We have 7 artists whose studios we completely manage, and 1 artist who tends to bring in commissions that are upwards of $750,000 each, that we're working with on one specific project. So yeah, we've got 7 clients right now whose studios we manage entirely. We take care of all of their day-to-day affairs, and we're growing that number. But we're also being very cautious about how we grow that number until we're able to announce the open call for our investment program. And 6 out of the 7 artists that we're working with right now have already been guaranteed a spot in that program. We consider them highly investable, and those would be the artists that are in the auction.
And if an artist wants to apply for that program, what do they need to do?
Yeah, so we're going to have an open call. It'll be an international open call. Like I said, we're modeling this after Y Combinator. My company got into that funding program through an application process. I did not have any connections to the people at that organization. To me, that is a really exciting aspect of what they do, is that, it's very democratized. So ours will certainly be an application process. In this early phase, not everybody knows who we are. Certainly, we get a lot of artists reaching out to us who've read about us in Art News or TechCrunch or heard us on BBC Radio. So, we get a lot of outreach from artists, but we haven't announced our open call yet. We're still in the process of fundraising for our own company. So as soon as we have the funds to announce our first open call, artists will apply for that program, and then we will be selecting artists from that application process.
And how did you meet and partner with AShareX?
Yeah, that's a good one. We met Alan at Art Week in Miami. I thought maybe we'll just talk to him about, his interest in maybe investing in the company. And when I walked in, he said, what do you think about putting some work up on AShareX from your artists? And I thought, I hadn't really considered that. I didn't, a lot of times artists tend to shy away from auction platforms because of some concerns that they have. But as I talked to Alan and saw that our values are like super aligned in the way that we think about supporting artists and the arts, I asked him, how does he feel about, giving the artist a 10% resale royalty on the future profits of the work? And he thought that sounded like an amazing idea. I asked him, what does he think about maybe putting all of the work into a single collection so that it could go up as one lot and not really, create sort of public pricing metrics for any one artist, which is something that they try to, avoid. So, I told him some of the things that, some of the reasons why artists don't always like, having their work go up for auction. And, what I found is that AShareX, really cares about the artists and the way that they're treated and the way that they get to be a participant in this auction and benefit from the future, profitability of the sale of their work. So all of those things kind of came into alignment, and we felt like AShareX was just a really great partner in terms of alignment of how we feel about, being players in the art market and thinking of art, as a business, but at the same time caring about the artists who make the art and their careers and how we treat them in the long run. So yeah, just a great alignment of values. And we went to the artist, said, hey, there's this company, here's what we've negotiated with them. Is this something you're interested in? Honestly, we thought maybe 2 or 3 of them would say yes. And almost every artist we work with was really excited about it. So here we are.
The 10% resale royalty is kind of a I don't know if this is the right analogy, but it's kind of like the white whale of the art world for a long time. This thing that people have been chasing after that never seems to get caught. There are regulations in California that require a resale royalty for artists that are based here or work that is sold here. There are regulations in Europe that require these kinds of royalties be paid to artists. But there's been a lot of resistance in the United States to having these things come from regulatory bodies where it's kind of regarded more like a tax on transactions that would create friction within the marketplace rather than something that one would choose to do electively, right? Within a kind of case-by-case basis and allow more flexibility and more freedom with the way that the resale royalty would be administered. And so I think it speaks a lot to AShareX as a partner and as an auction house that's willing to include this type of royalty in a sale like this through a sort of contract base, so that it's something that it represents to the artists as a little bit more, let's say, egalitarian, or allows the artist to participate in the upside success of their own careers. Because that's really where you see a lot of the kind of grousing in the art marketplace today and in the past, when artists who have made works that may be 7, 10 years old, they got benefits of the first sale of those works, and then a few years later they end up on the auction block. They go for 10x, 100x what they were sold for, and the artist is feeling very left out of those types of transactions. So it's both the actual participation, but I think it's also the sort of symbolic gesture that comes along with being able to do this as an elective matter rather than one that's being determined from outside.
I also want to add to this. I mean, to me, look, it's the right thing to do. I mean, one of the reasons artists don't like auctions is because they may sell a work to a collector for $20,000, thinking that collector just loved their work and was going to live with it in their home for a long time. And then 2 years later, when that artist's career is quite hot, that work goes up for auction and goes for $1 million, and the artist sees none of that. And so it's just, it's a kind of heartbreaking thing to have happen to an artist who, was trying to just sell a nice work to somebody who they thought was going to love it, to see that, really it just became this financial commodity that got flipped. So artists don't love it, and I think it's the right thing to do. But from the perspective of the investor, like, why would you want to do this? Inversion Art as a company promises a 10% resale royalty. We elect to do that on our own. I'd love to say that it's completely altruistic, because really, like I said, we do it because it's the right thing to do. But the reality is that it attracts awesome artists. Like, offering good terms to these artists is a way to get them to want to work with you. So we offer a 5-year holding period. We offer a 10% resale royalty. We promise the artist will come back to them and talk to them when we are ready to sell their work that's in our collection, and talk to their gallery representation and make sure that we understand who are the people who maybe have been waiting to buy some work, and do they have a waiting list that we might want to take a look at, just so that we can sort of make sure that we're working with the artist to place this work in a responsible way. But by making all of those promises, some of the best artists in the country are excited to be working with us, and wouldn't be if we weren't making those promises. If they thought that we might go flip the work a year later and we were going to take it to auction, whether they liked it or not, we would have some of those issues. So, in terms of this sale and the 10% resale royalty on this collection of work, I can tell you right now that of the 6 artists that are going to be in this collection, I don't think all 6 of them would be in this program if there wasn't the royalty. But more importantly, look, the truth is the reserve price for this collection is going to be set below what you would be able to buy this work at if you were to walk into the studios and buy all of these works individually. So there is a deal to be had here in bidding on this collection. It's going to, it could potentially go for less than what it would go coming out of the studio. And one of the reasons why the artists were willing to do that was because of the 10% resale royalty. So investors could kind of look at it like, well, that is, kind of a tax on my profits. But the reality is that because of that resale royalty, we've got fantastic artists in this collection that probably would not have allowed their work to go to auction. And we've got the reserve price set at a number below what it would cost you to buy this in the studio. And that's thanks to the royalty.
So that is a great segue into the next question, which is, can you please talk about the portfolio that's being auctioned, the artists and the artworks?
Yeah. Look, we spend a lot of time vetting the artists that we want to invest in. And, these are artists that Inversion has identified for investment of our own. When we talk about first off, from a personal standpoint, they're all just amazing people. They're super ambitious. I mean, we meet artists all the time who, they're making good money and they're just very comfortable, right? Like, they make enough money that they have a studio space that they like. They're able to pay their bills and they're quite comfortable with that. And they really just don't have this like grandiose vision for where they want to take things. That's just frankly not the kinds of artists that we're looking for. The artists that we have picked and that are in this collection are, when we talk to them, they know what the next 3-4 big exhibitions look like for them over the next handful of years. They know which kind of galleries they want to be in. They know, they want to make massive, public works projects. They are of a level of ambition that tells us that, like, things that they are going to keep pushing the envelope, which is exactly how great artists are made. And so there's just like this qualitative aspect to the artists that we're working with that, it's not present in every artist. And, so we spend a lot of time talking to them and making sure that we understand what their goals are. And then we kind of chase them, like follow them to where they want to go. But in terms of, the quantitative stuff that we talked about, the signals, we have in this collection, Maria Gaspar won a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2022. It's one of the most, prestigious awards you can win in the visual arts. She won the U.S. Artist Fellowship, the Latinx Artist Fellowship, the Freeze Impact Prize. I mean, she's pretty much at this point, her problem is like there's not very many big awards left to win. We've got Servan Marie, whose work is behind Jonathan here on the Zoom screen. Servan's, was represented in Greater New York, MoMA PS1. Those are the kinds of group exhibitions that, lead to great other opportunities and, future things down the road. Kevin and Jen McCoy, whose work is behind me, minted the first ever NFT back in 2014. Kevin secured a grant through Creative Capital and ultimately, created what we all know now today as an NFT. That work went up for sale at Sotheby's in 2021 and went for $1.3 million. So these artists are heavyweight award-winning artists whose works are going for very significant amounts. Ima Ime was just commissioned to paint a portrait of Frederick Douglass for the Mechanics Hall in Worcester, Massachusetts. So these are artists that are being identified not just by us, but by other organizations, and other groups that are tapping them as being at the top of the game. So there's a lot of information on the AShareX website about these artists and their backgrounds, but they have all most of them, two of them have PhDs in art and art history, one of them from Yale. I mean, these are exactly the kind of signals that our research has borne out, lead to high long-term art values. It's very evident in both the body of the work and the trajectory of their careers that, these artists are, poised for pretty great things.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I mean, one of the things that we say right on the landing page of the Inversion Art website is that we work with artists who are at an inflection point in their careers. And one of the ways that we think about that is from the management support standpoint for artists who are sort of running up against certain challenges in the studio, questions of scale, and the ability to manage the day-to-day and operational aspects in order to be able to continue to create the work that they want to create. All of the artists that we're working with right now, interestingly enough, are at these kind of creative inflection points too. Maria Gaspar is working on a amazing series that's going to take place with commissions from institutions in all 50 states, which is a large scale sort of social practice photographic project that she is working on that builds upon the work that she has done with issues of incarceration and incarcerated communities, specifically in her hometown of Chicago. And this is a major work that she's just beginning to embark on and is really just beginning to take shape. And it is going to take some time, but trust me when I say this, when this thing begins to go public and begins to get aggregated, it is going to be a major work with a huge amount of recognition for what Maria has been doing over the last 25 years. Artists like Ima Ime, Joey mentioned the commission for the Mechanics Hall. He had another commission with the Journal of Biological Psychiatry, one of the major scientific and medical journals for the psychiatric community. It's a very interesting sort of collaboration and project, but there's a whole audience of scientists and researchers and doctors who are now looking at his work and thinking about the relationship between art and wellness and pathologies of the mind and the brain. And it's a very interesting sort of overlap with what Ima is doing. And as a result, there's sort of a whole new range of attention and people who are taking note of his work and reaching out and wanting to have Ima's work in their facilities and to put it on display. We're working on a major exhibition of work to take place later this year, potentially down in Washington, D.C. So, these are artists that, interestingly enough, I think, somewhat perhaps by chance, but also by design, by working with us, are really building towards some major new activities. And so it's going to be, for me personally, a joy to sort of see these things come to fruition over the following years. And what all this means for the work that is going on, that has gone on display and is going up for sale on the HRX platform, is that people really have a chance to sort of catch a little bit of that fire as it's on the way up. And I don't normally have that type of that kind of sales pitch in me, but I really do believe that because of the things that these artists are working on, that this is an interesting opportunity to create this kind of collective support behind what these artists are up to and to be part of that community.
You guys have organically circled the wagons here, but to put a finer point on it, why do you think that this collection is a good investment?
The ultra contemporary art space has, been kind of exploding over the past decade, and Jonathan can speak to this far better than I can, but we look at results all the time for works that we know left the studio 5, 6, 7 years ago for $25,000 or $30,000 and are going up at auction and selling for $2.5, $3 million, $3.5 million. They're achieving 300x multiples, 1200x multiples. And that's just something that's not happening with a Picasso. I mean, so when you look at what's happening in the fractional art space, and other companies, what they're doing is fractionalizing what we call blue chip works, which is essentially like putting Pepsi on the stock exchange, right? You can of course go invest in Pepsi or some of these bigger companies and expect good, solid, steady, modest returns over a period of years. But when you look at Silicon Valley and investing in the next Dropbox or investing in the next Airbnb, the fractional auction space, the fractional art space isn't really making those kinds of opportunities available. And yes, they're riskier investments. There's no question about it. Investing in startups is far riskier than putting your money into a handful of blue chip stocks. But the reality is that you can only get maybe 7, 8, maybe as high as 12% gains if you are diversified across a number of blue chip stocks. Whereas if you have placed 20 bets on startup companies that are well positioned for success, and you've done a good job picking those companies, you have the opportunity to get these like 100x and 200 and 300x returns, which is just a completely different type of investing. It's a little riskier, but it is where there's much, much higher gains to be had. And that's essentially what we've done here with this collection. We've got 6 incredibly well-vetted, highly accomplished, artists whose works are still in the $5,000 to $50,000 range. Some of them, again, have, the McCoys have works that have sold for, $100,000 and above. And of course, the one for 1.3 million. So, some of these artists have already had, outcomes far, far higher than the price of the works that are going into this show. But, we're looking at 10 works across 6 artists. They are signature works from these artists. So if you look at the piece that, is in the auction from Ima Ime, it's one of the most important pieces that Ima has created. It was exhibited at the August Wilson African American Cultural Center in Pittsburgh. It's probably going to be exhibited again, numerous times. Even if it gets bought by the fractional owners, I'm sure it will be exhibited during the time that they're holding on to it. These are important works from these artists. And so, this is really an opportunity for people to invest in that earlier asset class. And, not only, I think one thing we haven't really talked about is, not only have they been vetted, not only do we believe that they're exhibiting signals that, correlate to very good long-term success, but, these artists also are working with Inversion Art, who brings a level of professionalism to managing their careers and their studios that most artists don't have access to. And what that means is, a lower failure rate, improved outcomes, like the work that we do with these artists to both bring in new opportunities. And HRX is just an example of one of those opportunities. But, we work with them to bring in, potential brand sponsors and other people, and things that are going to elevate their careers. So, not only are you kind of investing in a group that has been chosen by a team of art world experts. We've got the former chairman of Global Fine Art for Sotheby's on our board. We've got the curator of one of the best private collections in the world on our board. So not only has this group of artists been picked by people who really understand what we're looking for here, but they're being supported by our organization in a way that, makes them a lot less risky to think about, that they are not having the same bottlenecks as other artists. They are not having the same issues as other artists. They're able to take on more ambitious projects than other artists because they've got an entire team of people behind them helping them. So I think, this is an opportunity to not just invest as sort of like, an early stage venture capitalist in the art world, but, kind of more like the Y Combinator of the art world, because we just take such an active role in promoting the careers of our artists and, making sure they have the resources and support they need to do the kinds of incredible things that will make an artist's career. Our support allows them to take risks, and artists taking risks is how you get, these big artists who, end up with these profound works in the major institutions, is like their ability to take on more than what they're capable of doing by themselves. And so, their relationship with Inversion Art is freeing them up to focus on, Ima is a perfect example. Ima is, the amount of work he's able to do in the studio right now, because he's not dealing with the day-to-day, he's got all these opportunities. Work's got to be shipped out. It's got to be, insured. All of these things would normally be taking time away from him. But because we're doing those things, the amount of work he's able to create right now and the scale and the size of the work is just dramatically different. So yeah, I think, investing in this collection is allowing people to get in early on artists who are, very proven, have great traction, have great track records, have a lot of accolades, but also who are receiving support that is just going to completely change their ability to pursue their dreams and a big outcome that they would not be able to do if they didn't have the organization behind them.
Anything to add, Jonathan?
No, I think Joey summed it up pretty well. I mean, I think I just add that it's, we feel pretty privileged to be along for the ride in some sense with these artists and to be able to play a role in helping them shape the success that they are building for themselves. And I think one thing that Joey said is absolutely correct, that artists who feel comfortable in being able to take risks in the studio and take the risks with their career in order to achieve something transformational are the artists that in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years will be not just the marketplace, but the institution, right? They will be the art world, and everything else will sort of follow in their tracks. And rather than trying to bet who is going to end up, in these sort of already built temples of value, we're genuinely committed to following the artists where they are going to go, and I think that's where the big gains are really to be seen. I think these are artists and these are works and things that people are going to be doing in the future that genuinely will be transformational, right? Not every single one of them, I can't guarantee that, of course, but I do feel pretty strongly that the artists that we're working with, given the talent and the commitment and the ambition, are going to be doing pretty interesting stuff.
Last question. What does the future hold for you guys?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we are finalizing our own fundraising efforts so that we can announce our open call and invest in our first cohort. Like we've already identified, like I said, 6 artists who will be in that cohort. We are already, managing those artists' studios. So, what we're really hoping to do is, establish this program and be running it like clockwork twice a year. We would like to grow out the studio management side of the business so that we are helping more and more artists avoid sort of career pitfalls and be able to scale up their studios beyond a solo practice office. I'd say in the next 3 to 4 years, we want to be working with hundreds, if not maybe, close to 1,000 artists whose studios we manage. We have big ambitions for the company to be, providing, studio management services across a very large selection of visual artists, but there's opportunities, to do the same thing for fashion designers, for architects, for commercial artists. So, we've got our eyes on, being the back office for the creative world. In the meantime, we also hope to launch, for our investment program for fine artists. And as we get that, built out and stabilized and it's going well, we would, love to have an accelerator program for commercial artists, and then an accelerator program for fashion designers, and then an accelerator program for other creative professionals. And so, what we hope that in the future, we've completely changed the landscape of how artists get funded, as well as, change the way that artists think about keeping control of their own, business. I mean, at the end of the day, these artists are running a business. The art world likes to pretend that that's not the case, but, it very much is. And so we're hoping to establish a new type of organization that, gives artists the day-to-day support that they need to just focus on being artists, as opposed to having to be their own accountants, their own salespeople, their own tax attorneys, their own, everything else. These artists are expected to do anything and everything the studio requires, and that's just too much of a burden. So yeah, we hope that Inversion Art becomes synonymous with, early stage investing in the art world, as well as, a company that, every good artist wants to work with when they are ready to expand beyond themselves.